The galactic arena buzzed with nervous energy as thousands of alien beings packed the massive viewing stands. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on the central platform below. Today was supposed to be a demonstration of power, a warning to any species that might challenge the draconic empire's rule over this sector of space. Commander Zeth of the Regillian Defense Force adjusted his breathing apparatus as he watched from the diplomatic viewing box. His blue-scaled hands gripped the railings so tight his knuckles turned pale. Next to him, Ambassador Kree from the Centauri Federation whispered prayers in her native tongue. Her forearms wrapped around herself in fear. "This is madness," Zeth muttered through his translator. "Why would the humans agree to this demonstration?" Ambassador Kree's large black eyes never left the arena floor. Their ambassador said something about cultural exchange and building understanding. "I think they have no idea what they've agreed to." The center of the arena held a massive containment field, 30 meters wide and 20 meters tall. Inside that shimmering energy barrier, something moved in the shadows. The crowd fell silent as the movement grew larger, more defined. Then it emerged. The Void Reaper stepped into the light. Even from their safe distance high in the stands, every being in the arena felt their blood turn cold. The dragon was enormous, easily 15 meters long from nose to tail. Its scales were the color of deep space, so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. Spikes ran down its back like mountain peaks, and its wings, when it stretched them, cast shadows that covered half the arena floor. But it was the dragon's eyes that truly terrified the spectators. They glowed like dying stars, ancient and filled with countless years of death and destruction. This was Vorthok, the Void Reaper, the most feared creature in known space. Legends said it had destroyed entire fleets by itself. Its breath could melt starship hulls like ice in a fire. The dragon's head turned slowly, scanning the crowd above. Even behind the containment field, even surrounded by the most advanced force barriers in the galaxy, every being present felt like prey being examined by a predator. "Where are the humans?" someone whispered from the crowd. "Surely they won't send someone into that field?" High above in the Imperial box, Dragon Emperor Skoth watched with satisfaction. His own scales, deep red and gold, caught the arena lights as he leaned forward in his throne. Today would serve two purposes. First, it would remind all these lesser species why the dragons ruled this part of space. Second, it would put these new humans in their place. The humans had appeared in dragon space only 5 cycles ago, their small ships asking for trading rights and diplomatic relations. They seemed weak, soft creatures with no natural weapons, no scales or claws, no venom or psychic powers. Yet they had been persistent in their requests for peaceful contact. "Let them see true power," Emperor Skoth had declared. "Let them understand what they face if they ever think to challenge us." The arena's announcement system crackled to life, translating the message into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "The demonstration will begin shortly. The human representative will now enter the arena." A collective gasp rose from the crowd as a small door opened at ground level. Everyone expected to see a human warrior, or perhaps their most skilled diplomat wearing protective gear. Instead, what emerged made the entire arena fall into shocked silence. It was a child. The human was small, no more than 8 or 9 years by most species standards. She had brown hair, tied back with a simple ribbon, and wore what appeared to be a plain blue dress with white shoes. In one hand, she carried a small bag, and in the other, she held what looked like a flower picked from some distant garden. "This cannot be right," Zeth whispered, his voice shaking. "They wouldn't send a child. This must be some mistake." But Ambassador Kree was reading her diplomatic tablet with growing horror. According to the manifest, her name is Emma Chen, age 8, daughter of the Human Trade Delegation leader. The paperwork lists her as Cultural Ambassador. The crowd erupted in confused chatter. Some species called for the demonstration to be stopped. Others demanded to know if this was some kind of human trick or insult. The noise grew so loud it echoed throughout the massive arena. Emperor Skoth's voice boomed over the communication system, silencing the crowd instantly. "The human delegation has chosen their representative. The demonstration will proceed as planned. Down on the arena floor, young Emma Chen looked around with wide, curious eyes. She seemed completely unaware of the danger. Or perhaps she simply didn't understand it. The massive dragon in the containment field turned its terrible gaze toward her, and those ancient, star-bright eyes fixed on the tiny human figure. Vorthak, the Void Reaper, had lived for over 3,000 years. It had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, had burned planets bare, and watched stars die. Nothing in the universe held any surprise for it anymore. Nothing impressed it. Nothing made it feel anything except the cold satisfaction of destruction. But this small creature below was different. The dragon lowered its massive head, pressing it against the energy barrier to get a closer look. The child didn't run. She didn't scream. Instead, she tilted her head to one side and studied the dragon with the same curious expression it was giving her. "Hello," Emma said, her young voice barely audible in the vast arena. "You're very big, aren't you?" The translator systems picked up her words and broadcast them to the crowd. A ripple of disbelief went through the stands. The child was speaking to the dragon as if it were a large dog she had met in a park. Vorthak had heard countless voices in its long life. Warriors screaming battle cries before he destroyed them. Diplomats pleading for mercy for their worlds. Emperors demanding his service in exchange for gold and territory. But this voice was different. It held no fear, no demand, no desire for anything except simple conversation. The dragon's great eyes narrowed, studying the child more carefully. In all his thousands of years, no being had ever spoken to him without fear. Even other dragons approached with caution and respect. This tiny creature seemed to see him as just another being worth talking to. "My name is Emma," the child continued, taking a small step closer to the energy barrier. "What's your name?" "Do you have a name?" The crowd above held its breath. Some species couldn't even comprehend what they were witnessing. In their cultures, speaking to a Void Reaper was like trying to have a conversation with a hurricane or a volcanic eruption. It simply wasn't done. Emperor Skoth leaned forward in his throne, his golden eyes fixed on the scene below. This was not going according to plan. The child should be terrified. She should be begging for protection, demonstrating the weakness of her species. Instead, she was treating his most dangerous weapon like a potential friend. "The barrier will be lowered in 60 seconds, the Emperor announced. "Let the demonstration begin." Panic erupted in the stands. Several species began demanding evacuation. Others called for immediate intervention. The human diplomatic section was in complete chaos, with adults shouting and gesturing frantically at their tablets and communication devices. But Emma seemed unaware of the commotion above. She was completely focused on the great dragon before her, still waiting patiently for an answer to her question about his name. Vorthak found himself in an unfamiliar position. For the first time in millennia, he was uncertain about what to do. His purpose was clear. When the barrier dropped, he was supposed to demonstrate his power. Usually, this involved incinerating whatever was placed before him with a blast of fire hot enough to melt steel. But this small being showed no hostility, no challenge to his strength. She had simply asked his name and introduced herself, as if they were meeting at some social gathering rather than in an execution arena. The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, mirroring the child's earlier gesture. In a voice like distant thunder, he spoke for the first time in over a century. "I am Vorthak." The words came out in the old dragon tongue, but the translation systems immediately converted them to every language in the arena. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Many had never heard a Void Reaper speak except to declare someone's doom. This had sounded almost conversational. Emma's face lit up with a smile that could have powered a small star. "Vorthak, that's a nice name. It sounds strong, like you look." She paused, then added, "Are you lonely in there? It must be lonely being by yourself all the time." The question hit the ancient dragon like a physical blow. Lonely? The concept was foreign to him, yet as soon as the child spoke the word, Vorthak realized it described something he had felt for centuries without understanding it. Dragons were not social creatures like these smaller species. But they were not meant to exist in complete isolation either. For 300 years, Vorthok had been the Empire's ultimate weapon, kept in stasis between missions, awakened only to destroy. He had no companions, no equals to speak with. Even the Emperor spoke to him only to give orders, never to simply talk. This child, this tiny, fragile being, had identified something about his existence that he himself had never fully understood. 30 seconds until barrier deactivation, came the announcement. Emma looked up at the shimmering energy field and frowned slightly. Are they going to let me come in there? I brought you something. She held up the flower she had been carrying. I thought you might like it. It's from Earth, where I come from. Daddy says sharing gifts is how you make friends. Quote, the arena erupted into chaos again. Some species were evacuating their sections entirely. Security forces were moving into position around the arena floor. The human delegation was screaming into their communication devices, presumably trying to call off the demonstration, but Emma paid no attention to any of it. Her focus remained entirely on the dragon, and the dragon's focus remained entirely on her. Vorthok stared at the small flower in the child's hand. It was a simple thing. Yellow and white, probably picked from some garden earlier that day. But she had brought it for him. In 3,000 years of existence, no one had ever brought him a gift just because they thought he might like it. 10 seconds to barrier deactivation. The Emperor's voice could no longer hide his frustration. This demonstration was supposed to show human weakness, not create this bizarre interaction between his weapon and a child. Emma took another step forward, right up to where the energy barrier hummed with power. I hope we can be friends, Vorthok. I don't have many friends who are dragons. The barrier flickered once, then vanished completely. Vorthok, the Void Reaper, the most feared creature in known space, was now in the same space as a human child, with nothing between them but empty air. The arena fell into absolute, breathless silence. The dragon lowered his great head until it was level with Emma's tiny form. His eyes, each one larger than her entire head, studied her with an intensity that had made hardened warriors collapse in terror. Emma looked back at him with equal intensity. But where others saw death and destruction, she seemed to see something entirely different. You have beautiful eyes, she said softly. They look like stars. And then, in the most shocking moment in Galactic Arena history, Emma Chen stepped forward and gently placed her small hand on the tip of the dragon's massive snout. The touch was feather-light, barely noticeable to a creature of Vorthok's size, but the effect was immediate and profound. For the first time in centuries, the Void Reaper felt something other than cold emptiness. He felt warmth, not the burning heat of his own fire, but the gentle warmth of genuine connection. The child's hand was so small against his scales, yet somehow it carried more impact than any weapon ever used against him. Emma smiled up at the ancient dragon, completely unafraid, completely trusting. I think you're going to be my very best friend, she whispered. In the stands above, thousands of alien beings sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they were witnessing. The universe's most dangerous predator and a human child, sharing a moment of perfect peace in the center of an arena designed for demonstrations of power. And in that moment, everything changed. The silence in the galactic arena stretched for what felt like eternity. Thousands of beings from across the known galaxy sat frozen, their various minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. The sight of a human child gently touching the snout of the universe's most feared predator defied everything they thought they knew about both species. Commander Zeth was the first to break the stunned quiet in the diplomatic section, his voice barely a whisper. This is impossible. The Void Reaper should have incinerated her the instant the barrier dropped. Ambassador Kree's forearms trembled as she clutched her observation equipment. According to these readings, the dragon's internal temperature has actually decreased since she touched him. That doesn't make sense. Void Reapers burn hotter when they're preparing to attack. Down in the arena, Emma continued to gently stroke the massive dragon's snout with her tiny hand. Vorthok's eyes, which had struck terror into the hearts of billions, were half closed in what could only be described as contentment. The ancient creature had lowered himself even further, bringing his great head closer to the child's level. "You're not scary at all," Emma said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's perfect acoustics. "You're just sad, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes." The dragon's eyes opened fully at her words, fixing on her with an expression that no being in the arena had ever seen before. It wasn't the cold, predatory stare that had become the stuff of nightmares across the galaxy. Instead, there was something vulnerable in those starbright depths, something almost grateful. "How do you know?" Vorthok's voice rumbled like distant thunder, so low that many species felt it in their bones rather than heard it with their ears. Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "My mommy used to look like that sometimes. Before she got sick, she would try to smile, but her eyes stayed sad. Daddy says that sometimes grown-ups carry sadness inside them for a very long time." The dragon's massive head drew back slightly, studying the child with new intensity. "Your mother? She was sick? She died last year," Emma said simply, with the matter-of-fact honesty that only children possess. "That's why Daddy and I came to space. He said we needed a new adventure to help our hearts heal." A sound escaped the dragon then, something between a growl and a sigh. It was a sound of recognition, of shared understanding. "I, too, have lost things," Vorthok said quietly. Long ago, in the Imperial viewing box, Emperor Scouth rose from his throne, his golden scales rippling with agitation. This was not going according to plan at all. The demonstration was supposed to show the overwhelming power of the Dragon Empire, the futility of resistance against their might. Instead, his most dangerous weapon was having what appeared to be a therapy session with a human child. "Guards," the Emperor commanded, "prepare to reactivate the containment field. This farce has gone on long enough." But as his hand moved toward the control panel, something extraordinary happened. Vorthok's massive head swung up toward the Imperial box, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the Void Reaper spoke directly to his master without being commanded to do so. "No." The single word carried such finality, such unexpected authority, that Emperor Scouth's hand froze over the controls. Around the arena, security forces stopped in their tracks. The crowd held its collective breath. "What did you say?" The Emperor's voice carried a dangerous edge. Vorthok's great neck extended upward, bringing his massive head level with the Imperial box despite the distance. When he spoke, every being in the arena could feel the power in his words. "I said no. Scouth. This child has offered me something no one has offered in 3,000 years. I will not have it interrupted." The use of the Emperor's name, without title or honorific, sent shockwaves through the crowd. Even other dragons always addressed him as "Your Imperial Majesty." The casual dismissal of protocol was unprecedented. Emma looked up at the conversation happening far above her head, then back at her new friend. "Is that man being mean to you?" she asked with the directness of childhood. "He sounds mean." A sound that could only be described as a chuckle rumbled from the dragon's chest. "He has been difficult to work with," Vorthok admitted. "You don't have to work for people who are mean to you," Emma said firmly. "Daddy says that sometimes grown-ups think they can boss everyone around, but that doesn't make it right." The implications of this simple statement rippled through the crowd like a sonic boom. A child was essentially encouraging the galaxy's most dangerous weapon to quit his job. The political ramifications were staggering. Ambassador Kree was frantically typing on her tablet. "This changes everything," she whispered to Commander Zeth. "If the Void Reaper withdraws his allegiance from the Dragon Empire, the balance of power in this entire sector shifts overnight." Zeth finished, his tactical mind already running through the possibilities. "There are 12 major conflicts that are only stable because all sides fear dragon intervention." Down in the arena, Emma had pulled the flower from her bag and was offering it to Vorthok. "Here, I brought this for you. It's a sunflower. They always turn their faces toward the light, no matter what. Daddy says they're brave flowers." The dragon lowered his great head, and with more delicacy than anyone thought possible from such a massive creature, He gently took the flower between his teeth. The sight of the universe's most feared predator holding a tiny yellow flower was so surreal that several species translators simply gave up trying to process the scene. "Thank you," Vorthak said, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "It has been many years since I received a gift." "When was the last time?" Emma asked, sitting down cross-legged on the arena floor, as if she were having a picnic, rather than facing down a legendary monster. The dragon carefully set the flower down where he could see it, then settled himself in a more comfortable position. His massive bulk took up nearly half the arena floor, but he moved with such care that not even the smallest debris was disturbed near where Emma sat. "The last gift," he mused, his ancient mind reaching back through centuries of memory. "It was from another dragon. Long ago. Her name was Seraphina. She gave me a crystal from her hoard. Blue like deep ice. She said it reminded her of my scales when I was young, before they turned dark." "What happened to her?" Emma asked gently. "The war happened." Vorthak's voice carried the weight of ages. "The great war between the old Dragon Empire and the Crystal Collective. Seraphina chose to fight for her beliefs rather than follow orders. I was commanded to stop her." The arena had become so quiet that many beings were holding their breath. They were witnessing something impossible. The Void Reaper was sharing his history, his pain, with a human child. "Did you stop her?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I did as I was commanded," Vorthak replied. "And in those words was a lifetime of regret. I have been alone ever since." Emma stood up and walked closer to the dragon's great head. Without hesitation, she reached out and placed both her small hands on the scales beneath one of his massive eyes. "I'm sorry you lost your friend," she said simply. "That must have hurt very much." For a moment, the ancient dragon's composure cracked. A sound escaped him that was almost a whimper. A sound no weapon of war should ever make. In that instant, every being in the arena saw Vorthak not as a monster, but as someone who had been in pain for a very long time. "Why do you care about my pain, small one?" the dragon asked. "Your species and mine, we are supposed to be different. You should fear me." Emma smiled up at him with the pure, uncomplicated affection of childhood. "Daddy says pain is just pain, no matter who's feeling it. And friends help friends feel better. That's what friends do." "Friends." Vorthak repeated the word, as if testing its meaning. I had forgotten that word. I had forgotten that word. High above, the political implications of this conversation were not lost on the various diplomatic delegations. If the most powerful weapon in the Dragon Empire was forming a friendship with a human child, it would reshape the entire galactic political landscape. The Centauri Federation's senior diplomat was already drafting emergency communications to their home world. The Regilian Defense Force was calculating how this might affect their border disputes. Even the usually neutral Crystalline Collective was taking detailed recordings of every word exchanged, but Emma was oblivious to all of this. She was focused entirely on her new friend, with the wonderful simplicity of a child who saw a lonely being and wanted to help. "Would you like to be friends?" she asked seriously. "Real friends, not just pretend friends?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to the very fabric of the established order. Dragons didn't have friends among the lesser species. They had subjects, enemies, or occasionally useful allies. But friends? The concept was alien to their entire culture. Yet Vorthak found himself considering the offer with an intensity that surprised him. This small being had shown him more genuine kindness in minutes than he had experienced in centuries. She asked for nothing except his friendship, offered nothing except her own in return. "What would being friends mean?" the dragon asked carefully. Emma's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Well, friends talk to each other about important things. And they share snacks. But I don't think I have any snacks big enough for you. And they help each other when things are scary or sad. And they give each other hugs. But you're very big for hugs. So maybe we'd have to figure out a different way." The innocence of her response struck every being in the arena like a physical force. She was describing friendship as if it were the most natural thing in the universe, completely unaware that she was essentially offering emotional support to a creature capable of destroying small moons. And friends, Emma continued thoughtfully. Friends don't hurt each other. And they don't let other people hurt their friends either. The last part of her statement sent a chill through the Imperial box. If the Void Reaper accepted this friendship, and if he took seriously the idea of protecting his friend, then Emma Chen would become perhaps the most protected being in the galaxy. Emperor Skoth finally found his voice. Enough of this nonsense. Vorthok, you will cease this interaction immediately and proceed with the demonstration as commanded. The dragon's massive head swung back toward the Imperial box, and when he spoke, his voice carried a tone that no one had heard from him before. A tone of absolute defiance. I am no longer your weapon, Skoth. I choose friendship over fear, connection over isolation, and I choose to protect this child who has shown me kindness. The declaration sent shockwaves through the political establishment. The most feared creature in known space had just declared independence from the empire that had controlled him for centuries. Emma clapped her hands together in delight. Does that mean you want to be friends? Vorthok looked down at the child who had changed his existence in the span of a single conversation. Yes, little star child, I would be honored to be your friend. Oh, good, Emma exclaimed. And since we're friends now, I want to give you something else. She reached into her small bag and pulled out a picture drawn on paper with colored pencils. I made this for you yesterday. Daddy helped me find out what you looked like, so I could draw you right. The dragon lowered his great head to examine the child's artwork. It was clearly the work of young hands. The proportions were off, the colors sometimes went outside the lines, and the perspective was charmingly skewed. But it showed a large dragon with star-bright eyes standing next to a small figure with brown hair, and above them both, Emma had written in careful letters, Friends forever. This is, for me. Vorthok's voice was thick with emotion no weapon should possess. Uh-huh. Do you like it? The ancient dragon stared at the simple drawing with an intensity usually reserved for military strategies or ancient treasures. No one had ever created art for him before. No one had ever taken the time to imagine him as anything other than an instrument of destruction. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, he said quietly. Emma beamed with pride. I'm glad you like it. And Vorthok? Yes. My friend? The simple use of the word friend sent another ripple of shock through the watching crowd. Since we're best friends now, can I give you a best friend hug? The dragon blinked his massive eyes, confused. I do not know how such a thing would work. You are very small, and I am very large. Emma giggled, the sound bright and musical in the vast arena. That's okay. I have an idea. Can you put your head down really close to me? Vorthok carefully lowered his great head until it rested on the arena floor near Emma's feet. She walked around to the side of his massive snout and spread her arms as wide as they would go, pressing her tiny body against the warm scales of his face. This is a dragon hug, she announced proudly. See? I can hug your nose, and you can feel how much I care about you. The sight of the small human child embracing the fearsome dragon's snout created a moment so profound that many beings in the audience would remember it for the rest of their lives. It was a perfect symbol of innocence and trust, overcoming fear and hatred. But Emma wasn't finished. As she held her dragon hug, she looked up into one of Vorthok's great eyes and smiled with pure, uncomplicated love. I have one more surprise for you, she whispered. The very best surprise of all. And then, standing on her tiptoes and stretching as high as she could reach, Emma Chen pressed a gentle kiss to the warm scales just below the dragon's eye. The moment Emma's lips touched the warm scales beneath Vorthok's eye, something extraordinary happened. A pulse of golden light rippled outward from the point of contact, washing over the dragon's massive form like a gentle wave. The light was soft, warm, and completely unlike anything any being in the arena had ever witnessed. Vorthok's great eye widened in shock, then slowly closed as the sensation of pure, innocent affection flowed through him. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Void Reaper felt peace, not the cold emptiness of isolation, not the burning satisfaction of destruction, but the gentle warmth of being truly, unconditionally cared for. When the golden light faded, something had changed in the dragon's appearance. His scales, which had been the dark color of deep space, now held subtle hints of silver and blue, like starlight reflecting off midnight water. His eyes, still bright as stars, now held warmth instead of cold fire. The arena remained in absolute silence. Thousands of beings sat frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The kiss itself had been shocking enough, but the mysterious light and the visible transformation of the galaxy's most feared predator left them speechless. Emma stepped back and clasped her hands together, looking up at her friend with delight. "Oh, Vorthak, you look beautiful." The light made your scales all sparkly, like the night sky back home. The dragon opened his eyes and looked down at himself, seeing the subtle changes in his coloring. What did you do, little one?" "I gave you a best friend kiss," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Mama used to say that love makes everything more beautiful. I think it made you more beautiful too." High in the Imperial box, Emperor Skoth was no longer thinking about demonstrations of power or political posturing. He was watching the fundamental order of his empire crumble before his eyes. The Void Reaper, his ultimate weapon, his guarantee of absolute dominance over this sector of space, was no longer under his control. "Impossible," the Emperor whispered. "No one commands the loyalty of a Void Reaper except through fear and dominance." His aide, a young dragon named Pyraxis, was staring at the scene below with wonder rather than alarm. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said quietly, "perhaps command was never the answer. Perhaps what we've been witnessing is not conquest, but connection." Emperor Skoth's head whipped around to stare at his aide in shock. "You would dare suggest that our methods are wrong?" Pyraxis met his emperor's gaze steadily. "I would dare suggest that a human child has accomplished in one day what our empire has failed to achieve in centuries. She has earned the willing loyalty of the most powerful being in known space. Not through force or fear, but through simple kindness." Down in the arena, Emma had pulled out another item from her small bag. It was a friendship bracelet, woven from colorful threads in a pattern of blues and silvers that now perfectly matched Vorthok's transformed scales. "I made this last night," she said, holding up the tiny bracelet. "It's way too small for your arm. But maybe we could put it somewhere special? Friends wear matching things sometimes." Vorthak lowered his great head to examine the delicate bracelet. It was clearly made by young hands, with slightly uneven stitches and a few loose threads. But it had been crafted with love and care. "Where would you suggest we place it, my dear friend?" Emma studied the dragon's massive form thoughtfully. "Could we put it on one of your horns? That way, everyone will see that you have a best friend who cares about you." The idea of the universe's most feared predator wearing a child's friendship bracelet was so absurd that several species representatives began laughing despite themselves. But it wasn't mocking laughter. It was the kind of delighted surprise that comes from witnessing something unexpectedly wonderful. Vorthak carefully lowered his great horn, allowing Emma to slip the tiny bracelet over the pointed tip. It settled near the base of the horn, a splash of bright color against his dark scales. "There," Emma said with satisfaction. "Now everyone will know we're friends." The political implications of this simple act were staggering. Every diplomat in the arena was frantically calculating how this development would affect their relationships with the Dragon Empire. If the Void Reaper was no longer an imperial weapon, if he was instead the protector of a human child, then every treaty, every alliance, every careful balance of power in the galaxy would need to be reconsidered. Ambassador Kree was speaking rapidly into her communication device. Priority message to the Federation Council. The strategic situation has fundamentally changed. The human diplomatic mission has successfully neutralized the Empire's primary military asset through friendship. Recommend immediate revision of all regional military assessments. Commander Zeth was having similar conversations with his own command structure. But as he watched the dragon and child interact below, his military mind was beginning to grasp something remarkable. "This isn't just about removing a weapon from the Imperial arsenal," he said to his aide. "The humans have just demonstrated a form of power we never considered. They've turned the galaxy's greatest threat into its potential greatest protector. The aide looked confused. Sir? Think about it, Zeth explained. That dragon now has emotional investment in protecting not just the child, but humanity in general. Any threat to human interests becomes a personal affront to the universe's most dangerous predator. The humans didn't just neutralize a weapon. They created an ally of incomparable power. This realization was spreading through the diplomatic sections like wildfire. The humans, who had seemed like one of the weakest species to enter this sector of space, had just gained the protection of a being capable of single-handedly altering the course of interstellar conflicts. Down in the arena, Emma was explaining to Vorthak how friendship worked in human culture. Friends help each other, she was saying seriously. If someone is mean to you, I'll tell them to stop. And if someone is mean to me, you can tell them to stop too. That's how we take care of each other. Vorthak listened with the gravity of someone receiving crucial intelligence. And if words are not sufficient to make them stop? Emma frowned thoughtfully. Well, Daddy says sometimes grown-ups need more serious consequences for their actions, but friends always try talking first. Because maybe the mean person just doesn't understand how to be nice. The dragon nodded slowly. I understand. We attempt communication first, and resort to stronger measures only if necessary. Exactly, Emma beamed. You're a very smart dragon, Vorthak. In the crowd, this exchange was being interpreted in various ways. Some saw it as a child innocently teaching a monster about diplomacy. Others recognized it as the establishment of rules of engagement for the galaxy's newest and most unusual alliance. Emperor Skoth could remain silent no longer. His voice boomed across the arena, amplified by the communication systems. This demonstration is concluded. All parties will return to their designated areas immediately. But instead of complying, Vorthak raised his great head and spoke directly to the crowd of thousands. His voice, when amplified by the arena systems, could be heard clearly by every being present. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, his tone formal but warm. For 3,000 years, I have served as an instrument of fear and destruction. I have ended conflicts through force, maintained peace through the threat of annihilation. But today, a small human child has shown me another way. The crowd listened in rapt attention. Many were recording this historic moment. I have learned that power without compassion is merely tyranny, that fear without understanding breeds only more fear. From this day forward, I choose to serve a different cause. I will protect the innocent, defend the peaceful, and stand against those who would use force to dominate others. The declaration sent shockwaves through the galactic political establishment. The Void Reaper was essentially announcing his transformation from an imperial weapon into an independent force for justice. Emma clapped excitedly. That's a wonderful speech, Vorthak. You're going to help lots of people. The dragon's attention returned to his small friend. And what of you, little star child? What will you do now? Emma looked thoughtful. Well, Daddy and I were supposed to stay here for a while to learn about different species and help with trade agreements. But maybe now we can learn about being friends with dragons, too. I would like that very much, Vorthak said softly. Emperor Skouth's voice cut through the moment. You forget yourself, Vorthak. You are bound by ancient laws, by oaths of service. You cannot simply abandon your duties. The dragon's head swung toward the imperial box. But his response was calm rather than angry. The ancient laws speak of service to the Empire, Skoth. But they also speak of honor, of protection of the innocent, of justice. Tell me, when was the last time my actions served those principles? The Emperor fell silent, unable to answer. Vorthak continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. I have spent centuries being a symbol of fear. Perhaps it is time I became a symbol of something better. Emma tugged gently on one of the dragon's smaller scales to get his attention. Vorthak? If you're going to help people now, does that mean you won't have time to be my friend anymore? The question clearly concerned her, and the dragon's expression softened immediately. Oh, my dear little friend, helping others is exactly what friends do together. I hope you will help me learn how to be good instead of just fearsome. I can do that, Emma said eagerly. Being good is easy. You just think about how other people feel, and you try to make them feel better instead of worse. It sounds simple when you explain it, Vorthok mused. The best things usually are simple, Emma replied with the wisdom that sometimes comes from the mouths of children. Throughout the arena, beings from dozens of species were witnessing something unprecedented. They were watching the birth of a new kind of relationship between species, based not on dominance or fear, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. As word of the day's events spread throughout the galaxy, the repercussions would be enormous. The Dragon Empire's grip on the sector would weaken significantly. Several ongoing conflicts would shift as the threat of dragon intervention was removed. New alliances would form, and old ones would be reconsidered. But perhaps most importantly, the idea that differences between species could be bridged through understanding and kindness would take root across the galaxy. The story of Emma and Vorthok would be told and retold, inspiring others to seek connection instead of dominance, friendship instead of fear. The human diplomatic mission had achieved something far greater than trade agreements or territorial negotiations. They had introduced a new concept to galactic politics: the power of love. As the arena began to empty, with various species rushing to communicate the day's events to their home worlds, Emma and Vorthok remained on the arena floor, continuing their conversation about friendship and how to help others. Can I ride on your back someday? Emma asked. I've never ridden a dragon before. I have never carried a passenger before, Vorthok admitted. But for you, my friend, I would be honored to learn. High above, Emperor Skoth watched his former weapon make plans with a human child. And for the first time in his long reign, he wondered if perhaps there were forms of power he had never understood. The age of ruling through fear was ending. The age of friendship had begun. And it had all started with a little girl who saw a lonely dragon and decided to offer him a flower and a hug. The universe would never be the same. As the great arena lights began to dim, signaling the end of what was supposed to be a demonstration of imperial power, Emma yawned sleepily. It's been a very big day, she said to Vorthok. Indeed it has, little star child, the dragon replied gently. Indeed it has. Oh. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a dozen different worlds, other children would hear this story and learn that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. That sometimes love really can conquer all, even dragons.